Hi everyone, bonjour à tous. Ce matin, les plus importantes installations portuaires du Canada sont inactives. Pour un pays qui dépend du commerce, les risques économiques, commerciaux et sanitaires sont extrêmement élevés et disproportionnés aux enjeux des négociations collectives. Canada is a nation whose economy relies on trade, on getting goods to and from global markets. This morning, Canada's largest East and West Coast ports sit silent. Donc, je suis ici aujourd'hui pour annoncer que nous apportons une solution aux différents conflits de travail qui se déroulent actuellement dans les ports de la Colombie-Britannique et du Québec. Nous nous retrouvons face à une impasse totale dans les trois conflits. Pour que des négociations soient couronnées de succès, les parties doivent y mettre l'effort nécessaire. À Montréal, entre le SCFP 375 et l'AEM, et au port de Québec, entre la Société des arrimeurs de Québec et SCFP 2614, les parties font preuve d'un manque d'urgence alarmant et les négociations ne progressent pas vers de nouveaux accords. In BC, between the BC MEA and ILWU 514, the parties are also showing an alarming lack of urgency and negotiations are not progressing towards a new deal. Let me address each of the disputes in some detail. First, for British Columbia ports. Negotiations between the BCMEA and ILWU 514 began on November 30th, 2022, nearly 2 years ago. And yet today, we are still far from a deal. Both parties filed various complaints to the CIRB about these negotiations. On October 23, 2024, the CIRB granted in part BCMEA's complaint of bad faith bargaining against the union. Since November 4th, strike action by the union and a lockout by the employer has effectively halted activity at all West Coast ports. Last week, I requested that the parties meet again to resume negotiations. This happened on Saturday, and mediators determined that no path forward is possible based on the inflexibility on both sides. Pour ce qui est du port de Montréal, les négociations perdurent depuis le 1er septembre 2023 et aucun progrès n'a été fait. Depuis le 30 septembre dernier, 7 avis de grève et 3 préavis de mesures de l'employeur, dont un lockout, ont été émis. Tout ça en moins de 2 mois, ce qui a créé une instabilité économique et logistique importante. Les plaintes se sont multipliées devant le CCRI et en octobre, j'ai proposé la nomination d'un médiateur spécial, mais les deux parties ont même été incapables de s'entendre sur 7 propositions. Le 7 novembre dernier, l'employeur a déposé son offre finale et celle-ci a été rejetée à 99,7% par les membres du syndicat. Depuis, un lockout complet a été décrété par l'employeur et le syndicat maintient ses arrêts de travail. Enfin, le port de Québec. La situation de ce port est différente des 2 autres ports, mais pas moins inquiétante. Ça fait plus de 2 ans et demi que la situation perdure au port de Québec. Des travailleurs de remplacement font maintenant le travail, chose que nous déplorons, pour maintenir des opérations presque normales depuis le début du lockout. En conséquence, la relation entre les parties et la paix industrielle se détériore un peu plus chaque jour. Afin de dénouer l'impasse, nos médiateurs ont proposé des solutions. Le 17 avril dernier, le CCRI a mandaté un vote sur ces solutions, lesquelles ont été rejetées à 84%. Depuis, il n'y a aucune perspective d'accord en vue et le lockout perdure depuis plus de 2 ans. Nous agissons donc pour rétablir la stabilité pour ce port et bien entendu pour les employés et leurs familles qui sont affectés. The collective bargaining process belongs to the parties alone, but the consequences impact the lives of working people and families across Canada. As Canada's Minister of Labour, it is my duty and responsibility to secure industrial peace in the national interest of all Canadians and to promote conditions favorable to the settlement of the parties' disputes. So today, I have invoked my authorities under the Canada Labour Code. Under Section 107 of the Code, I've directed the Canada Industrial Relations Board to order that all operations and duties at the ports resume, and to assist the parties in settling their collective agreements by imposing final and binding arbitration. This will bring the necessary resolutions for both workers and employers. I have also directed the Board to extend the terms of the existing collective agreements until new ones are established. There will be a debate about this, the second such use of this instrument to settle a long-standing labor dispute. I welcome that debate. La patience des Canadiens à l'égard des perturbations de nos chaînes d'approvisionnement a été mise à l'épreuve et s'épuise. La menace pour notre intérêt national et le bien-être économique des Canadiens est trop grande. Les Canadiens attendent des parties qu'elles négocient des accords équitables et qu'elles le fassent rapidement. Cela n'a pas été le cas dans tous ces cas. Je tiens à le souligner. Il y a une limite à l'autodestruction économique que les Canadiens sont prêts à accepter. Les meilleurs accords sont toujours ceux qui sont négociés. Mais lorsque les accords sont retardés ou n'arrivent jamais et en présence d'autodestruction économique, il y a une obligation d'intervenir. En tant que ministre du Travail, cette responsabilité m'incombe. Pour les Canadiens, il y a une limite. These work stoppages, are impacting our supply chain, hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs, our economy, and our reputation as a reliable and international trading partner. We rely on the movement of goods through our ports. If these work stoppages go on, the impacts will only worsen, and our well-earned reputation for reliability will be put at risk. Because of these impasses, more than $1.3 billion in value of goods is affected every day. Canada's economy is taking a hit. Farmers, small businesses, manufacturers, retailers, families. The list goes on of those already feeling the impacts. Not only that, but also thousands of hardworking Canadians could be laid off if this continues, including thousands of union workers. 200 in one company, 350 in another, and that weeks before Christmas. For example, a company reached out to me yesterday and told me that because they have no vehicles left on the dock and they haven't had a vessel in a week, they will have to make layoffs as soon as today. They added that customers are ripping up their contracts and going elsewhere, U.S. West Coast, U.S. East, Gulf Coast. This is happening all across the country. The impact that these stoppages could have on Canada's potash industry would be devastating. We need the potash mine for fertilizer to reach the farmers who grow food all over the world. Already, Canadian companies relying on potash exports have had to turn to international suppliers such as Russia, driving up costs and hurting competitiveness. Les constructeurs automobiles sont confrontés à des retards car des pièces essentielles en provenance d'Asie sont bloquées dans les ports, ce qui menace l'emploi. Les détaillants, surtout à l'approche des fêtes de fin d'année, doivent faire face à des rayons vides car des stocks essentiels n'arrivent pas à temps. Et même des produits de base comme le sel. Le sel est nécessaire à la production de chlore liquide pour l'eau potable dans nos municipalités, en particulier dans l'ouest et le nord du Canada. Plusieurs exportateurs ont également mentionné qu'ils devront augmenter les coûts des produits pour compenser les coûts supplémentaires liés à la logistique de transport. For all those who are impacted, I am committed to ensuring a swift resolution to protect our economy and the livelihoods of Canadians. I should add that I am grateful that my predecessor, Seamus O'Regan, launched an industrial inquiry in the West Coast ports to examine structural problems with collective bargaining and others. Given the current situation, it seems clear to me that we will have to examine their work very, very carefully to see how longer-term solutions can be applied to those and other ports and similar disputes across the country. It is our government's responsibility to ensure industrial peace. Mais je suis extrêmement fier de faire partie d'un gouvernement qui s'est engagé à mener des négociations collectives équitables et à veiller à ce que les travailleurs obtiennent des accords équitables. Il est clair que la négociation collective n'est pas facile, mais nous avons constaté à maintes reprises qu'elle produit les accords les plus solides et les plus durables, au bénéfice des syndicats, des employés et leurs familles et des employeurs. Je tiens à réaffirmer que les accords négociés sont encore et toujours la meilleure façon de progresser, mais nous ne pouvons pas nous permettre que les Canadiens souffrent lorsque les partis n'assument pas leur responsabilité de conclure des accords ensemble. Nous rappelons également que tout cela n'est pas nécessaire si les partis peuvent encore s'asseoir et parvenir à un accord. C'est encore une voie qui leur est disponible. Ça n'est pas exclu et nos médiateurs demeurent à leur disposition. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Merci. On va maintenant passer à la période de questions. Vous êtes nombreux dans la salle. Je vous demanderai de garder les questions courtes et les réponses courtes autant que possible pour en prendre le plus possible. So there are quite many of you in the room, so I'll kindly ask to please keep the questions short, answer short as well. So Jordan Golding, Financial Post, you want to go first?
Hi, Minister. Can you just provide a timeline on how quickly you expect work to resume at both these ports in light of the order you've made today?
The board will take up the directive, I know, with great dispatch. It should take a matter of days for them to react and issue an order. Obviously, just as in the earlier circumstance, the board is an independent agency, so its actions belong to it and it alone, but it should not take an undue amount of time.
This is the second time now in 1 year that you've issued binding arbitration. You said that this might prompt some debate. Are you concerned at all about the precedent you're setting with regards to interviewing in the collective bargaining process?
It's certainly not something I take lightly. My belief and the government's belief in collective bargaining and in the fact that collective agreements that are reached at the bargaining table are the most durable agreements it is possible to conclude, that has not changed. However, when mediators, who are among, it should be said, the best in the world, inform me in 3 different circumstances that we are at a total impasse and the way forward is not clear, the duration of the disputes is not clear, and there is real economic, health, and other risks posed to Canadians, then that I take that responsibility extremely seriously. And Canadians, as I said, have limited tolerance right now for economic self-harm.
Michel Comte, Agence France-Presse.
Good morning, Minister. You mentioned in your statement that the government's identified structural problems in collective bargaining, particularly as it relates to transportation. In your view, what's needed? Are we talking about a wholesale change in the process or just some tweaks, and how long do you think that will take to bring about to put forward these changes?
I don't have a prescription, but I do have a very good diagnosis. And what I have observed in my tenure as Minister of Labour is that we have these negotiations that stretch over months and years and need not. Days and days and weeks of mediator and conciliator time is spent with these parties. The positions of both sides are well known to each other over a long period of time. People have the opportunity to consider those positions, consider what a compromise might look like, but those compromises never seem to come. And so, as I said in my remarks, we need parties to act with greater urgency in these circumstances and to conclude deals that are in the best interests of their members or the best interests of their other stakeholders, in the case of employers. We want a competitive economy, but we want people making good wages and working in safe workplaces too. Those arrangements are best worked out at the negotiating table. But in these circumstances and in the prior circumstances, there was no perspective, no possibility, realistically, of that occurring.
Follow-up, Michel? No? Ryan Tumulty, Toronto Star.
Minister, you mentioned the industrial inquiry that's underway. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, there was an expert, 2 experts wrote a report on what was going on in West Coast ports, and they concluded that both sides were engaged in surface bargaining. They weren't actually dealing with the issues at hand because they assumed you would step in. Certainly the unions in Montreal and Vancouver have said that their employers want you to step in and that they're not negotiating to force you to do that. Are you concerned you're being used in this?
Except they are negotiating. In the case of these three disputes, we have over 2 years, on average, worth of negotiations to point to. Mediators spend days and days and weeks with these parties. Offers are tabled. It is not for me to determine the terms of any collective agreement. I am merely cheering for an agreement. But the fact is that employers and employees sit down for marathon bargaining sessions. And unfortunately, in these cases, they've gone nowhere. So as the economic losses threaten the country and begin to mount, it is up to the government to ensure that a fair settlement's reached. Arbitration leads to fair settlements, maybe not as durable as those that are reached at the bargaining table, and that we can get on with the economic life of this country and avoid layoffs and other carnage in many of our commercial sectors and for workers and their families.
But you stepped in, you're stepping in here, you had to step in the railway dispute, WestJet last year. I think you came very close to having to step in with the other Port of Vancouver strike. Are you just concerned that even though they're negotiating, they're sitting at the table, they're not actually bargaining, they're not changing their positions?
Well, we've concluded deals too. We concluded deals with the Air Canada pilots in the grain terminals on the West Coast, and Prince Rupert just ratified. We concluded deals with the Videotron workers that had gone on for a great many months. So deals are getting reached at the bargaining table. Deals are getting reached even in the logistics and transportation sector. But no deal, according to the experts who are accompanying these parties, is possible in the short or medium term in the present circumstance. So when Canada's economy, Canadians' health is threatened, any responsible government has to step in.
Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, M. MacKinnon. Si à chaque fois qu'il y a un conflit de travail, il y a une impasse, là, comme c'était le cas aussi avec CPCN, vous imposez un arbitrage exécutoire, est-ce que ça ne vient pas miner le droit des employés de faire la grève?
Nous estimons que nos gestes dans ces cas sont raisonnables dans une optique où ça fait, dans un cas, au-dessus de 2 ans, dans les deux autres, au-dessus d'1 an, que les partis négocient. Les partis ont la liberté totale de conclure des ententes à la table de négociation, accompagnés par nos médiateurs. Mais si je donne l'exemple de Montréal, je suis allé voir les partis en octobre. J'ai proposé un changement de visage, un médiateur spécial. Et les partis sont arrivés avec des préconditions pour la simple nomination d'un médiateur. Donc, vous comprendrez qu'on est loin d'une entente négociée à la table. Et pendant ce temps, des menaces de mise à pied dans le secteur manufacturier au Québec, dans le secteur du détail et dans la chaîne d'approvisionnement canadienne, tant sur la côte ouest que la côte est, mène tout gouvernement responsable à vouloir protéger les citoyens, à vouloir protéger son économie. Aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas le temps de prendre des risques et des chances avec notre économie, et les enjeux qui sont en cause dans ces conflits ne sont pas légaux de ce qui est en cause et en jeu au sein de l'économie canadienne. Donc, pour moi, c'est un geste responsable. Ça envoie les partis devant un arbitre où ils peuvent plaider leur cause et l'économie canadienne peut reprendre son rythme.
Mais vous comprenez que c'est facile pour les employeurs sous juridiction fédérale de se dire, bien, on va mettre les employés en lock-out parce qu'on sait qu'Ottawa va intervenir et va imposer un arbitrage exécutoire.
Sauf qu'ils font des offres et ils négocient. Évidemment, c'est aux syndicats d'accepter ou non les offres des employeurs dans tous les cas. Évidemment, c'est aux employés de faire les choix qui s'imposent. Mais ce que j'observe, c'est que ces partis-là n'agissent pas avec l'urgence que les Canadiens s'attendent d'eux.
Donc, c'est seulement les syndicats qui sont de mauvaise foi, c'est ça que vous dites?
Non, pas du tout. J'ai dit les partis n'agissent pas avec l'urgence que les Canadiens souhaiteraient qu'ils aient dans de telles circonstances.
Mike Lecouteur, CTV.
Minister, I know you were saying that you have to wait for the board to act, but when can Canadians and Canadian businesses expect activity in the ports to restart? Do you have a date in mind?
I can only go with what we observed in the last year or so, and that it was a matter of days. But again, the CIRB is an independent entity, and it will pursue its processes as it deems correct.
I wanted to ask you about another labor issue that could be coming. Canada Post issued a 72-hour notice of a strike. 3 years ago, your government did legislate them back to work. Because of the issue in the House of Commons right now, with no business being able to be tabled or done at all, you're not going to have that lever. So what are you looking at in terms of trying to make sure that if this does get to the point where we are at today and we are near the busy Christmas season, what are you going to do?
Well, we are hoping to achieve a deal at the table. The issues at hand in the Canada Post negotiations are substantial. They're significant. There's a lot of work to do. And I know the parties are negotiating today. We will make every effort possible to keep them at the table and keep them talking. And we hope to achieve a negotiated settlement there.
Brian Platt, Bloomberg.
Hi, Minister. Until this year, if a government wanted to impose binding arbitration, it passed legislation in Parliament. Is this the end of that now? You've now acted twice without using legislation. Do you think this is the end of Parliament having a say in this process?
I'm not here to declare the beginning or the end of anything. We take these disputes individually. Obviously, we have 3 today that have converged, where Canadians expect us to act in the interests of their economy and their jobs. So that's what we're doing. But labor ministers must examine the facts as they are in any given case and act in the way he or she deems most expedient. And in this case, this is the path we chose.
This is a government that has tried to have good relations with organized labor. You mentioned earlier that you expect this decision will prompt a debate. What reaction have you gotten when you acted through this executive measure to end the rail strike, and now you've acted again? How worried are you about permanently damaging your relations with organized labor, with the Liberal Party and organized labor?
We've worked very hard to be a government that favors the interests of workers, their economic well-being, that of their families, and of course to work on items that are important to the labor movement. That has included things like sick days, the passage of C-58, which bans replacement workers, which I would note again have been in use in Quebec City for some time now. Those two added to a number of other initiatives, consultations, specific tangible actions that we've taken that make life better for Canadian workers. I know that the labor leaders that I speak to understand that all of these cases, just as I just said, are different. I will obviously let them speak for themselves. I don't think it would be unreasonable for me to observe that they would also prefer that these deals be done at the table. But that makes 2 of us.
Marina van Stackelberg, CBC.
The strike notice from the Union for Canada Post workers means that mail carriers could be off the job as early as Friday. If that happens, will the federal government intervene to stop that from happening?
Our plan is to support collective bargaining at this stage.
And just to follow up, you have mentioned in the past that federal mediators have been involved. Has the government put any additional resources into this as we see this strike notice being issued?
We've put all the resources that are required into supporting the parties in Canada Post.
Can you be a bit more specific?
That's mediation support.
Bill Curry, Globe and Mail.
Good morning. On another topic, still trade related, Doug Ford said today he would like to see Canada focus on striking a bilateral trade deal with the United States because the issues that Mexico has with the U.S. are completely different than Canada's concerns. What do you make of that proposal?
I'm going to let those responsible for that issue speak to it. As you can imagine, Bill, I've spent most of my time lately working on what we're talking about this morning.
On labor disputes, your actions on the rail front are currently before the courts. What was your thinking in taking this action today, given that you still haven't received the ruling from the courts on the legality of your actions on the rail front?
The parties are, of course, pursuing all of their rights, reserving all of their rights, and pursuing the legal challenges that you just mentioned. Obviously, that's something that we were expecting, but it's also something we expect to defend vigorously in court. When these decisions are taken, they're taken after a long look and with a view to the reasonableness of the action and the proportionality of the issues that we are resolving vis-a-vis the issues that might exist at the bargaining table. So we maintain that this decision is made under powers that are granted to me by the Parliament of Canada, and we will defend those actions vigorously in court.
Kyle Duggan, Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. I'm wondering, you had mentioned Canada's trading relationship. What kind of things have you been hearing from your American counterparts, from U.S. businesses? Have you been engaged with them? What are they saying? What kind of pressure are you feeling?
I've been listening to Canadian businesses and consulting widely with Canadians and hearing very carefully their interventions with respect to this. As for the U.S., all I would observe is that you will know of the labor issues that exist on the East and Gulf Coast ports. We obviously followed that very carefully. That is an issue that is not yet resolved, so I don't have any specific comment on that. Canada makes decisions in the best interests of Canadians and based on facts that are present in Canada.
And can you to explain to Canadians who have been following these labor issues, but not the specifics of each individual contract, just the general pattern of this kind of stop-and-go labor disruption, why haven't you been stepping in sooner in these cases? Your mediation talks failed ultimately. A lot of these instances, it seems like they're kind of bound to this kind of conclusion. So why aren't you stepping in faster?
We want to give every chance for collective bargaining to succeed. We want to support the parties as long as we can, and sometimes, of course, these things become, they go right down to the wire. When labor disruptions occur, when work stoppages occur, whether they are initiated by unions or employers, then we have to consider the health, economic, trade, and other implications for Canadians and the impact on other working Canadians. So that's what we do. That's what I do. And we make moves that I believe are reasonable under the circumstances, but only after exhausting a collective bargaining process that we continue to believe in.
Gillian Piper, Global.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. Why do you think that your government has faced so many major strikes back to back? Is this a breakdown of the collective bargaining process?
No, we've settled. There have been many contracts, whether under federal jurisdiction or not. The collective bargaining continues to function in Canada and continues to function well. And we've, even in the federally regulated sector, concluded several successful rounds of bargaining in the past little while. As I said earlier, we take all of these issues on a case-by-case basis, evaluate the facts that are before us, and take actions that we believe are reasonable under the circumstances and worthy of the trust that Canadians place in us to manage them.
An NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, when your government issued binding arbitration in the rail strike, said, there's really no difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Both of them are going to be beholden to the employer. Do you think that issuing binding arbitration twice in 1 year, as you've pointed out, is seriously damaging your relationship with working voters, and is that repairable in your eyes?
There are a lot of working Canadians whose jobs depend on our supply chains functioning. I mentioned some of them in my statement: auto workers, potash workers, farmers, small business people who need merchandise for their shelves to sell at Christmas. So I view actions to restore order, reasonable actions to restore order in our supply chains, as being pro-worker. I do not like reading of layoffs. I do not like hearing of instability. And obviously we want to make sure that our economy continues to function, that our trading relationships continue to function, and that international commitments that Canadian companies and workers have made to supply other countries are honored. Those are the things we consider, and those are fundamentally pro-worker impulses.
On me dit qu'on a le temps pour une dernière question. On va aller en français en ligne avec Michel Sabat de la Presse canadienne.
Bonjour, Monsieur le ministre. Pour rebondir sur la première question de ma collègue Gillian, êtes-vous ultimement responsable de la multiplication de ce type de conflit de travail de par votre décision de l'été dans le secteur ferroviaire?
Nous agissons dans du cas par cas. Je soulignerai que les relations de travail dans les installations portuaires ont toujours été difficiles. Ça a toujours été des négociations difficiles. À Montréal, le Parlement a légiféré en 2018. Et comme j'ai dit dans ma déclaration, il est évident que nous devrons évaluer le système de négociation dans certains cas, dont les installations portuaires. Ça, il me semble évident. Donc, comme j'ai dit à un de vos collègues, j'évalue toutes ces situations sur du cas par cas, et les dégâts économiques imposés au Québec et au Canada sont tels que tout gouvernement responsable se doit de prévoir un choix pro-travailleur, un choix pro-économie, et agir dans les intérêts supérieurs de l'ensemble des Canadiens.
Mais sentez-vous que les employeurs vous utilisent maintenant en s'attendant à ce que vous interveniez, que vous êtes devenu le dindon de la farce des employeurs?
Ben, c'est démenti, cela, de par le fait que les partis négocient. Dans le cas de la Colombie-Britannique, on parle de 17 jours en médiation et conciliation. À Québec, 75. Et à Montréal, 34. Il y a des offres de part et d'autre qui sont rejetées, bien évidemment. Mais négociation, il y a. Entente, il n'y a pas. Et on doit trouver, évidemment, à plus long terme, on doit trouver des solutions où ces partis-là trouvent le chemin de l'entente plus facile. Les Canadiens s'attendent à ça, et c'est quelque chose que j'aimerais leur offrir aussi.
Voilà qui met un terme à cette conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup et bonne journée.